Hey everyone, Sam from United People's TV here with the United 180 for you, bringing you all the latest news. And today we are just going to focus on Gary Neville being sacked as manager of Valencia. It happened 4 months it took him to get sacked, and let's be honest, it really didn't go well for him. I think he's now left there with the worst winning percentage of any La Liga manager in history, 18.5%. It was in terms of your first job, Gary Neville couldn't have made it any harder for himself. He went in to a club that was in the Champions League, frustrations brewing among fans, did it halfway through a season in a country he didn't speak the language. And at the same time, Valencia took a big risk on Gary Neville. Obviously, no experience at all, and he didn't speak the language. That's a big thing here, but it really didn't work out for him. There was occasional performances, very, very occasional, but it was just put in between so much mediocre. And the fans were happy for him to leave at that point. And strangely enough, it seemed like people were happy that Gary Neville failed. I don't really understand that. People saying that it's written off his career as a pundit, it's written off his potential career as a manager. Hasn't done anything towards him being a pundit at all, separate jobs entirely. Doesn't do his career as a manager any favour because it's a bad start. It's recoverable. He did it abroad, so it doesn't really matter. He can come back to England and he can recover from that. But it doesn't do him any favours at all. What I asked on Twitter, said, what were your thoughts on Gary Neville getting sacked? A couple of you sent in your views, so I'll read a few out here. One from Pete Chester. He said, I kind of think Gary Neville did a decent job in a foreign country. I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Pete, just in that he really, he really didn't. Everything was against Gary Neville. He was swimming upstream before he took charge of his first game as manager of Valencia. But he knew that. He knew what he was walking into. And it was a calculated gamble from Gary. If it worked out, would have been hailed as an innovator in that he's a very young Englishman going abroad for his first job. Look how brave he is. Well done. And you got Peter Lim in charge. And Peter Lim co-owns Salford City with Gary Neville and the Class of '92. He's also invested in Hotel Football, which obviously Gary Neville was one of the investors in as well. So he had a good structure there. He also had his brother in Phil as assistant, who's actually been kept on by Valencia. Imagine that. No one would have expected that. But everything, as foreign as the country was, there was a lot of familiarity for Gary at Valencia, but it just didn't work out for him. And as much as I'd like to say I think he did a good job, he did not. It took him 4 months to get sacked. That kind of says it all. One here from Horny Alfred, last name. He said, he's got balls but looked out of his depth. Bitter lesson, but a good one. Only will do him and future club country good. Now, obviously, he's going to be with England at Euro 2016, trying to put this behind him straight away. Whether he comes back in as a Sky Sports pundit, we'll see. Probably hazard a guess and say yes, unless he's going straight back into management, then he's going to go elsewhere. But I'll stand by my point that I've always made. I think Gary Neville will be a brilliant assistant manager at Manchester United. There are certain players that you look at and you think they're going to be great managers. I look at Gary Neville and think he'll be a great coach. He'll be a person who is so tactically astute and aware that he can read the game. That doesn't necessarily mean that he can manage. I'm sure he is he was United's captain. He was one of our best captains, I'd say. I really loved having Gary Neville as captain, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be translated into becoming a good manager. And I wouldn't say that the Valencia job has proved that or disproved it, but it hasn't done him any favours. Final one here from Myron Royce. He stepped in the shoes with a huge task in front of him, but he has shown that he has what it takes to be a good manager. I'm not really sure what he did with Valencia that shows me he can be a good manager. He learned the language very quickly. I thought, that was very good. He always came across quite well in his press conferences and his approach to the media. He was very comfortable with that. Not all managers are straight away. But something went wrong with the players. Whether that would be him not being able to impose his tactics properly, or the players just weren't responding to it. It just didn't work out for Gary in Valencia. Fair play to him for going out there and doing it. It was a gamble, it was a risk, which hasn't paid off, but he's young enough to recover from it. It's not a final nail in the coffin for nobody has a final nail in the coffin for their first job. It just makes it more difficult for him wherever he goes next. He's going to have to get rid of the shadows lurking from Valencia and push himself off to a harder start. But this is Gary Neville. He's a fighter. He wasn't the most talented player, but he worked, and he worked himself into the person that he is today. And I think he's going to take that exact same approach to management, which is why I'm not going to write off his career. That would just be foolish to do it after a first job, even if it is a failure. But that's it for today's United 180. Subscribe to the video and drop a like as always, and we'll speak to you soon. Take it easy.